This barbaric ritual was so extreme that even ancient Rome's darkest entertainment districts banned it. Yet in Constantinople's hippodrome, it occurred nightly, targeting children as young as 10. Discover how systematic child abuse forged history's most dangerous woman and sparked the massacre of 30,000 people. The practice was known as Leader and the Swan. A naked child would be laid on stage while trained animals performed acts that would shock modern audiences. 80,000 spectators cheered as coins rained down on a little girl's body. This was far more than entertainment. It was legalized trafficking on an industrial scale. The 10-year-old enduring this nightmare would grow into the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire, Theodora. Everything started when her father, the bearkeeper, died. This is how childhood trauma creates monsters who reshape history. When Theodora's father passed away, it triggered one of the most systematic child trafficking operations in ancient history. But to understand how the death of a single man could devastate an entire family, you need to know about the Byzantine political system that controlled every aspect of life. Constantinople in 504 CE was divided by two massive political factions, the Blues and the Greens. These weren't just sports teams. They were political parties, controlling jobs, entertainment, and government positions. Every citizen belonged to one faction, and that allegiance determined the course of their entire life. Cassius, Theodora's father, held a key role in the Green faction as the official bearkeeper, training massive brown bears for combat in the hippodrome before 80,000 screaming spectators. When Cassius suddenly died, his family should have automatically inherited protection and employment. That was the law, but everything went catastrophically wrong. Asterius, the Green faction's dancing master who oversaw entertainment positions, accepted a bribe. Instead of safeguarding Cassius's widow and 3 daughters, he handed the bearkeeper position to another man entirely. With a single corrupt decision, he condemned 3 young girls to the most sophisticated child trafficking network of the ancient world. Theodora's mother faced an impossible choice: watch her daughters starve or hand them over to the brutal system that kept Constantinople's entertainment industry profitable. She chose survival, but the cost was unimaginable. To grasp the horror, know that even ancient Romans who invented gladiator death matches considered Byzantine circus entertainment too extreme for civilized society. What followed would today be considered organized child abuse. In a scene of calculated humiliation, Theodora's mother dressed her 3 daughters as supplicants with laurel wreaths and paraded them before 80,000 spectators in the hippodrome. She was effectively advertising them for intimate services, pleading with the crowd to take pity on these children, now available for the darkest demands of the entertainment industry. The Greens, responsible for this crisis through corruption, turned their backs completely, but the Blues showed mercy, offering work to the stepfather. This moment sealed Theodora's destiny and imprinted a lifelong lesson. She would never forget who abandoned her family and who offered compassion. By age 10, Theodora was performing the most degrading acts imaginable. Leader and the Swan became her specialty, lying naked on stage while trained geese picked barley seeds from her body, thousands of men cheering and tossing coins at a child's naked flesh. Yet the theatrical perversion was only the beginning. The real horror unfolded behind the hippodrome walls, where children as young as 8 were expected to provide intimate services to senators, merchants, and wealthy citizens. Byzantine law treated actresses and performers as equivalent to prostitutes. Physical submission wasn't just expected, it was legally enforced. Consider the psychological toll. A child who should be learning to read and write was instead discovering how men's carnal desires made them powerful, how pain could generate profit, and that her body was her only asset in a world that viewed her as disposable. But Theodora didn't merely survive, she studied. While other children broke under psychological torment, she analyzed the power dynamics. Each performance revealed how senators lost control and dignity over a child's body. She observed wealthy merchants become pathetic, desperate for their preferred entertainment. Every act became a masterclass in human weakness, intimate psychology, and the dark mechanics of desire. The hippodrome became her university, and the curriculum was manipulation through physical exploitation. The bearkeeper's death had created perfect conditions for producing history's most dangerous woman, someone who understood how to weaponize the very carnal appetites men assumed gave them power. And Theodora was about to graduate with deadly honors. For 6 years, Theodora endured the most barbaric practices in the ancient world. Yet while other children were destroyed by systematic abuse, she learned how to destroy the men who believed they owned her. By 16, she was the Hippodrome's most sought-after performer, not just for her body, but for her intelligence. The same senators and merchants who had thrown coins at her naked 10-year-old body now paid top prices for private sessions. They thought they were buying a prostitute. They had no idea they were shaping their own executioner. Then came the opportunity that would turn victim into predator. Hesselus, the Syrian governor of Libya, visited Constantinople seeking entertainment. One of Rome's most powerful provincial governors, he controlled immense wealth and military forces. Seeing Theodora perform, he didn't just want her for a night, he wanted complete possession. The offer was unprecedented: become his personal concubine, live in luxury, and escape the Hippodrome's trafficking forever. For a girl who had spent 6 years exploited by strangers, it seemed like salvation. In Libya, 56 CE, Theodora lived in Hesselus's palace for nearly 4 years. But this wasn't mere luxury, it was her graduate education in intimate manipulation. Here, she discovered that the barbaric practices she had endured could be wielded against the men who thought they controlled her. Hesselus believed he owned her body, but Theodora learned which desires humiliated him, which fantasies he would pay anything to satisfy, and which physical acts undermined his political judgment. Every intimate encounter becomes a lesson in psychological warfare. Yet the most important insight is this: powerful men become utterly helpless when they are physically dependent. Hacabilis, a commander of armies and governor of provinces, turns into a pathetic, desperate figure whenever she controls his access to pleasure. The same dynamic she witnessed as a child. Influential men losing dignity over erotic entertainment now becomes her primary weapon. Then comes a crucial mistake. Theodora begins using her intimate knowledge to sway his political decisions. When Hacabilis realizes his provincial policies are being influenced by his concubine's physical manipulation, he explodes in rage. The scene that follows exposes the grim reality of women's positions in this world. "Get out, you worthless Maine," Hacabilis screams, hurling her belongings into the burning Libyan sand. She stands alone in the desert heat, sweat beading on her skin, the bitter taste of dust and humiliation filling her mouth. After 4 years of luxury, she is cast back into trafficking with nothing. Yet this betrayal becomes her most valuable education. The journey back to Constantinople transforms her into history's deadliest, intimate predator. Ship by ship across the Mediterranean, she sells her body to survive. But now she applies everything learned from Hacabilis. The salt spray stings her face as she systematically undermines every man who believes he is using her. The cramped ship holds reek of unwashed bodies and desperation, but Theodora has learned to thrive here. Each night, in suffocating quarters, she discovers new ways to weaponize physical intimacy. The Roman merchant who pays extra for clever conversation, she learns his trade secrets and leverages them against his competitors. The ship captain who grants her free passage, she uncovers his smuggling operations and stores the knowledge for future advantage. Every coin becomes a case study in male weakness. She builds a mental archive of how desire makes powerful men vulnerable, foolish, and ultimately destroyable. In Alexandria, she makes a revelation that will alter everything. She converts to monophysite Christianity under Patriarch Timothy III. But this is not a spiritual awakening, it is strategic positioning. She is establishing a religious power base entirely independent of the trafficking system that shaped her. More importantly, in Antioch, she meets Macedonia, a blues faction performer who has been sending intelligence back to Constantinople. Macedonia reveals that a 40-year-old prince named Justinian has been asking pointed questions about the former circus girl who survived Libya. What Theodora doesn't yet realize is that her reputation has preceded her. tales of a woman who can manipulate provincial governors, who survived abandonment and turned it into strength, who understands the dark psychology of powerful men better than they understand themselves. As her ship nears Constantinople's harbour, she glimpses the golden domes of the city that once cast her out as a child. But she is no longer the same girl who left. The barbaric practices meant to destroy her have instead created the most dangerous woman in the Roman Empire. She is about to meet the man who will give her the ultimate target for intimate revenge, an entire empire. What follows proves that the cruelest practices can be transformed into lethal political weapons. Theodora is ready to use everything learned, from systematic exploitation to seduce, manipulate, and ultimately control the future emperor of Rome. Constantinople, 522 CE. When 40-year-old Prince Justinian first sees Theodora at an elite court gathering, he believes he is looking at merely another beautiful former performer. He has no idea that he is staring at a woman who has spent 16 years mastering how to destroy powerful men. The seduction begins immediately, but this is no ordinary attraction. This is intimate warfare honed through years of barbaric practice. Theodora deploys every technique learned from her exploitation. She analyzes Justinian's carnal preferences with the same cold scrutiny she once applied to hippodrome clients. She discovers his weakness for intelligent conversation during private moments, a vulnerability she learned to exploit with Roman merchants on those Mediterranean voyages. She identifies his need for emotional connection, the same dependence that once made Hacabalus physically subservient. The shocking truth she hides from Justinian during those desperate nights in Alexandria, she learned more than religious conversion. She learned to use her body not merely for survival, but to completely dominate men's minds. Justinian is about to become her greatest experiment in intimate manipulation. The psychological dynamic is terrifying. Justinian believes he is choosing to marry this extraordinary woman, but Theodora is systematically programming his physical obsession. Every private moment is calculated to deepen his dependence. Every intimate encounter is designed to weaken his political judgment. When Justinian announces his intention to marry her, the court erupts in scandal. Senators cannot believe the heir to the Byzantine throne would wed a woman who once performed degrading acts for entertainment. Yet this scandal reveals the brilliance of Theodora's strategy. She is not merely seducing Justinian, she is forcing him to choose between political propriety and carnal obsession. And physical addiction always wins. The legal barriers seem insurmountable. Constantine's ancient laws specifically forbid senators from marrying actresses. Once an actress, always an actress, the law permanently enforces erotic entertainers' separation from political power. But the true obstacle is personal. Empress Euphemia stands between Theodora and ultimate authority like an immovable wall. She herself rose from slavery to the highest position a woman could attain. But Euphemia sees exactly what Theodora represents: intimate manipulation weaponized for political conquest. "I climbed from slavery," Euphemia declares before the court, finger pointed accusingly at Theodora, "but I was never a prostitute." The confrontation crackles with tension. Former slave versus former trafficking victim, fighting over who deserves to rule an empire. Euphemia understands the danger perfectly. She is not merely opposing a marriage, she is attempting to prevent a woman trained in barbaric practices from gaining imperial power. She blocks every legal reform, uses her influence to halt marriage discussions, and forbids Theodora from attending court functions. Then, on a cold night in 523 CE, Empress Euphemia dies mysteriously in her sleep. No warning signs, no illness, no witnesses, just a sudden death that removes the only person capable of stopping Theodora's intimate conquest of the empire. The timing is suspicious. Within hours of Euphemia's death, Emperor Justin begins drafting new legislation tailored specifically to allow Theodora's marriage. The law is so precise, it might as well have her name inscribed upon it. The terrifying reality: Theodora had learned about poisons during her years of trafficking. The experienced women who survived the system taught her which herbs could incapacitate dangerous clients, which toxins left no trace, and which methods mimicked natural death. The sudden removal of the sole obstacle to her marriage is not coincidence. It is the application of knowledge gained through years of abuse. 525 CE, Hagia Sophia. The wedding ceremony represents the ultimate triumph of intimate manipulation over political authority. Every step Theodora takes down the marble aisle is carefully orchestrated theatre. The same girl who once performed naked for coins now dons imperial purple silk, yet her mastery of performance remains unchanged. This is not merely a wedding, it is the coronation of systematic exploitation. The child who endured barbaric practices in the hippodrome has now used those same techniques to seduce an emperor, eliminate her primary rival, and position herself as co-ruler of the Roman Empire. But Theodora's intimate manipulation has produced something even more dangerous than a powerful marriage, a partnership founded on physical obsession where political decisions are influenced by carnal control, and where the brutal practices of her past become the governing philosophy of an empire. The former trafficking victim is about to become the ultimate predator on the largest possible stage. 7 years after converting her exploitation into imperial power, the Empress faces the ultimate test. When 30,000 people demand her death, she will prove that the most barbaric practices create the most ruthless political monsters. January 542 CE. The Nika revolt is not merely a political uprising, it is a direct attack on everything she represents. For the first time in Byzantine history, the blues and greens unite under a single battle cry, Nika. But their true target is not just the government, it is the former prostitute who manipulated her way to imperial power through intimate warfare. The crowds filling Constantinople's streets are not angry merely about taxes or policies. They are revolting against the very idea of a woman trained in degrading practices ruling the empire. Every chant of Nika carries the unspoken message, the must die, must die. This is the moment she has been preparing for her entire life. Every humiliation endured in the hippodrome, every manipulation technique learned through trafficking, every psychological weapon honed through childhood trauma, all lead to this point. Violence erupts like wildfire through the narrow streets. The acrid smoke of burning buildings stings eyes as mobs surge forward with torches. The original Hagia Sophia erupts in flames, its ancient timbers crackling and collapsing in showers of sparks. The Senate House burns to the ground, centuries of Roman law reduced to ash. But for the Empress, watching the city burn is not frightening, it is familiar. The chaos recalls the hippodrome crowd screaming for erotic entertainment. The same energy that once demanded her naked body now demands her death. She understands mob psychology because she learned to manipulate it as a child. The metallic smell of blood mingles with burning wood as armed rebels execute government officials in the streets. Military units defect, discarding their weapons and joining the uprising. Even the Emperor's bodyguards hesitate, questioning whether to stay loyal or save themselves. Then the rebels make their ultimate declaration. They proclaim Hypatius, nephew of the former Emperor Anastasia, as the new ruler. The message reverberates through every district. The reign of the corrupt imperial couple is over. Military commanders discuss evacuation plans openly. Treasury chests filled with gold and silver are loaded onto ships in the harbour, wooden planks groaning under the weight. Justinian's closest advisors beg him to flee while escape is still possible, their voices cracking with desperation. Yet they do not understand what they are asking. They are urging Justinian to abandon the woman who has controlled him for 7 years through intimate manipulation, whose physical influence has become the foundation of his political authority. They are asking him to reject everything she represents. Then the Empress rises from her chair, her silk robes rustling through the terrified silence. This is the moment when years of exploitation transform into ultimate political power. The 10-year-old girl who learned to perform for violent crowds is about to give the performance of her life. My opinion is that the present time, above all others, is not the right moment for flight. Even though it brings safety, her voice cuts through the panic like a blade, each word carrying the authority of someone who has survived the worst men can do to a woman. May I never be separated from this purple, and may I not live to see the day when those who meet me shall not address me as mistress. She looks directly at Justinian, her dark eyes burning with 16 years of accumulated childhood rage. The flickering candles cast shadows across her face as she delivers words that will seal the fate of 30,000. As for herself, she invokes an ancient saying, "Royalty is a good burial shroud." This is more than political defiance. It is revenge on the ultimate scale. The crowd demanding her death represents every man who ever paid to abuse her body, every senator who threw coins at her naked childhood performances, every client who believed he owned her because he purchased her services. Justinian, still physically obsessed after 7 years of manipulation, chooses massacre over abandoning his Empress. The plan is brutally simple and reveals her mastery of crowd psychology learned in the Hippodrome. Generals Belisarius and Mundus will surround the arena during the rebels' victory celebration, trapping all enemies in a single location, the very venue where she once performed degrading acts. 100,000 people fill the Hippodrome, believing they are witnessing the birth of a new empire. Instead, they are walking into the ultimate revenge fantasy of a former trafficking victim. The same arena where she learned to manipulate crowds through spectacle will now become the site of history's most systematic massacre. The killing begins when the celebration reaches its peak. Imperial soldiers block every exit with grinding metal gates, then move through the crowd with methodical precision. Screams echo off stone walls as families are slaughtered where they stand, blood pooling in the sand that once absorbed the tears of exploited children. The irony is perfect and terrifying. The arena that taught her to perform for violent crowds now becomes the stage for her ultimate performance. The systematic execution of everyone who dared challenge her ascent to power through intimate manipulation. By the end of the day, silence replaces the screams. More than 30,000 corpses litter the arena floor. Not a single rebel survives. The Hippodrome, where barbaric practices once entertained the masses, is now a graveyard claimed by the woman those practices created. Justinian's 535 CE reform requires all governors to swear loyalty not just to the emperor, but to his empress as well. The former trafficking victim has achieved the ultimate revenge, legal recognition as co-ruler of the empire that once exploited her body. 30,000 people died because barbaric practices created a woman who understood that survival demanded the complete destruction of anyone threatening her authority. And this is only the beginning of her reign of vengeance. With 30,000 corpses as proof of her power, Theodora now applies intimate knowledge gained from barbaric practices to systematically eliminate every remaining threat. What follows demonstrates how childhood exploitation becomes perfect training for political assassination. From her private imperial chambers, she operates what historians call a parallel government, but it is far more sinister, an intelligence network that would rival modern spy agencies. While Justinian holds court in the Grand Throne Room, she conducts her true work in private quarters where the walls witness whispered confessions and secret dealings. Her network functions through manipulation perfected in the Hippodrome. Trusted agents and loyal women move through palace corridors, collecting the most dangerous intelligence, who sleeps with whom, which senators harbour shameful desires, and which secrets could destroy political careers. She institutes a protocol that shocks the imperial court. Everyone must prostrate themselves and kiss both her feet and Justinian's. This is not merely reverence, it is domination through public humiliation. The same dynamic she endured as a child performer is now reversed, wielded with deadly precision. Now begins her masterpiece of political assassination. Target 1. Pope Silverius, 537 CE. When the Pope refuses to restore her religious ally, Theodora does not argue theology. Instead, she applies manipulation techniques honed during years of exploitation. Working through Belisarius and his wife Antonina, she fabricates treason charges designed to exploit the paranoia of powerful men. The Pope, accused of colluding with the Goths, dies in exile, eliminated by a woman who learned that men's fears make them vulnerable to any accusation. Yet this is only practice for her next target. Target 2. Queen Amalasuntha of the Ostrogoths, 535 CE. Here, jealousy becomes genocide. Amalasuntha embodies everything Theodora fears: natural nobility, inherited power, and worst of all, she has been corresponding with Justinian about political alliances. Theodora recognizes the signs immediately: late-night readings of letters, lingering over diplomatic phrasing that could be interpreted as romantic, political discussions that resemble intellectual seduction. She sees Justinian falling under another woman's influence using the same techniques once used on him. Her solution reveals the predator's mindset: if you cannot control them through intimacy, destroy them completely. Using Ambassador Peter the Syrian, she persuades King Theodad to eliminate his own cousin. The method is deliberately intimate. Amalasuntha is murdered while bathing vulnerability and physicality combined in the ultimate act of revenge. However, her masterstroke demonstrates how barbaric practices produce perfect killers. Target 3. John the Cappadocian, 541 CE. As Praetorian Prefect, he is the only man capable of rivaling her influence over Justinian. More dangerously, he is immune to ordinary manipulation because he understands it. So, Theodora applies the psychological warfare she learned as an exploited child. For 6 months, she wages a campaign designed to break his mind in the same way her own was once tested, in the Hippodrome. Every day, John receives disturbing gifts echoing the trauma techniques used on child performers: wilted flowers symbolizing death, small daggers representing penetration, paintings of execution methods reminiscent of the violence victims always fear. John begins to exhibit the same psychological symptoms she endured as a child: sleeplessness, paranoia, jumping at shadows, sweating through normal interactions. She is recreating her own childhood trauma in the mind of her enemy. Then comes the trap that reveals her true genius. The Empress and Antonina form the deadliest alliance imaginable. 2 women who understand exactly how manipulation can destroy men. They use John's own daughter as unwitting bait, arranging a fake conspiracy meeting where surveillance agents record every supposedly treasonous word. The fall is immediate and total, reducing John from a position of imperial power to begging in the streets of Egypt. This is how a woman trained in barbaric practices eliminates her enemies, by recognizing that every man's mind can be broken in the same way hers once was, albeit with different techniques. These assassinations reveal her greatest achievement, transforming victimhood into predation. She is not merely eliminating rivals, she is using the knowledge gained from exploitation to reshape an empire where manipulation becomes the central tool of governance. The former trafficking victim has become the ultimate predator, and this is just the beginning. The barbaric practices that created history's deadliest woman continue to influence the world even today. Her ultimate victory was transforming childhood exploitation into laws that would govern human behavior for centuries. The Corpus Juris Civilis, the foundation of Western legal tradition, bears the fingerprints of a woman who learned law through systematic abuse. Her legal reforms serve a singular purpose: ensuring that no other woman endures the degrading practices she survived, while simultaneously using the same techniques to maintain absolute power. Her anti-prostitution legislation reads like the revenge fantasy of a former trafficking victim. She prohibits forced prostitution, makes it illegal for brothel keepers to prevent women from leaving, and orders the closure of establishments that practice the same exploitation she once endured. At the same time, she establishes the Metanoia convent, requiring former prostitutes to enter religious life, thereby controlling other women's physicality in the same way hers was once controlled. Her marriage and criminal justice reforms reveal a mind that understands intimate violence intimately. She makes rape punishable by death, regardless of social rank, transfers a rapist's property to the victim, and expands women's divorce rights. These are not simply progressive policies, they are the legal codification of revenge by someone who knows precisely how men use physical power to harm women. Most revealing of all, her succession control operates through manipulation of family structures. She orchestrates marriages across the court, punishes those who resist her politics, and ensures that her conquest of Justinian translates into dynastic control for generations. June 28, 548 CE. When the Empress dies at 48, likely of cancer, the political impact reveals the true extent of her manipulation. Justinian falls into complete psychological collapse, never remarries, and rules ineffectively for 17 more years. The man she controlled for decades cannot function without the woman who weaponized intimacy to consolidate political power. Most tellingly, little significant legislation emerges after her death. The legal genius of their partnership dies with the woman who mastered the art of turning manipulation into governmental control. Archaeological evidence from the San Vitale mosaics shows her depicted larger than other figures, wearing a cloak embroidered with the three kings bringing gifts to Christ. She positions herself as equal to biblical royalty, the ultimate transformation from trafficking victim to divine authority. Today, tourists take selfies in the Hippodrome, where 10-year-old Theodora once performed degrading acts for coins, the same arena where she later ordered the deaths of 30,000 people. From exploited child to the most powerful woman in history, she proved that the most brutal practices can create the deadliest political monsters, but was transforming victimhood into predation worth 30,000 lives. The girl who learned manipulation through childhood exploitation ended up manipulating an entire empire. Her story proves that barbaric practices don't just destroy victims, they can create destroyers. Subscribe to discover more stories of how childhood trauma shapes history.